Imagine waking up tomorrow morning. Your mind is completely intact. You know your name, you remember your childhood, you know exactly what your schedule is for the day.
Right, everything feels normal.
Exactly. But when you reach over to turn off your alarm, you realize you don't have an arm.
Oh, God.
Yeah. You look down and you have like a dozen thin, brown, completely uncontrollable insect legs just waving frantically in the air.
That is pure nightmare fuel.
Right. Your back is this hard, armored carapace. You are entirely stripped of your human body. So what is your absolute first thought? Are you screaming?
I'd be screaming.
Exactly. Are you trying to call 911 with your antenna? But if you were the protagonist of Franz Kafka's The Metamorphosis, your first thought, your overriding panic-inducing realization is, oh my God, I missed my train and my boss is going to be furious.
Which is it is the ultimate cognitive dissonance.
It really is.
And it sets the foundation for what is arguably the most profound exploration of existential dread in 20th century literature. Because, we aren't dealing with a science fiction thriller here.
Right, no radioactive spiders.
Exactly. There's no magical curse. There's no desperate search for a biological antidote. We are looking at a narrative landscape where the outside world, the physical reality of the body, finally and brutally catches up to the internal psychological reality of the individual.
And that's our mission for today's deep dive. We are unpacking the philosophical crisis at the absolute center of these sources. Assuming you already know the basic premise salesman turns into giant bug, chaos ensues, we want to look at the mechanics of why this story is still so deeply unsettling over a century later.
It really gets under your skin.
Literally.
Yeah, literally. We're tearing into what actually constitutes human identity, the terrifyingly conditional nature of familial love, and the crushing mechanistic weight of modern capitalism that turns people into literal pests.
To do that, we really have to start by analyzing the exact mechanism of his awakening. Let's do it.
The narrative doesn't ease you into the horror. It is a cold, clinical, just matter-of-fact declaration. Gregor Samsa wakes up, finds himself transformed into a monstrous vermin, and the universe offers zero explanation.
Zero. None at all.
Right. The lack of exposition is highly deliberate. By completely removing the how of the biological impossibility, Kafka forces us to focus entirely on the implications.
Right, because if this were, say, a Stephen King story, we'd spend 3 chapters investigating a cursed artifact or an ancient burial ground.
Exactly, some sort of origin story.
But here, the universe doesn't owe you an explanation. The absurdity just is. But let's pause on that reaction you mentioned earlier, the cognitive dissonance, because I have to push back a little on the realism of this, even within an allegorical framework.
Hey, lay on me.
He's lying there on a hard shell. He has these pathetic, uncontrollable legs waving helplessly, and his primary concern is the train schedule.
Yeah, the trains.
Like, it's 6:30, the train leaves at 7, he's missed his 5 o'clock alarm. It's like waking up to find your house is completely engulfed in flames, the ceiling is collapsing, and your only thought is, oh no, I forgot to iron my shirt for my 9 a.m. Zoom meeting.
That is a great analogy.
But how broken does a human psyche have to be to prioritize a middle management job over a literal biological catastrophe?
Well, see, that brokenness is exactly the point. It is a specific trauma response to the hyper-capitalist machine.
Okay, unpack that a bit.
So, Gregor's psychology has been so thoroughly colonized by his economic obligations that his biological survival instinct has been completely overwritten. He is a traveling salesman, and if we look at the existential mechanics of his life prior to the transformation, he was already a machine.
He was already an insect.
Precisely.
And a lot of that is because of the debt, right?
Yeah.
His father went bankrupt 5 years ago, and Gregor essentially sold himself into indentured servitude to his father's creditor.
Yeah, he estimates he needs 5 or 6 more years of this soul-crushing loop just to buy his freedom. His entire existence is early trains, bad food, superficial relationships, and a boss who sits on a high desk and forces employees to shout up at him.
Which is just so demeaning.
It is. So when he wakes up with a carapace, the horror isn't the physical mutation. The horror is the interruption of his utility. The alienation of the modern worker is so total that Gregor views his own body merely as an instrument for labor.
Wow. So when the instrument breaks?
Right. When it breaks, his anxiety isn't about his health. It's entirely about the social and economic punishment he will face for failing to produce.
Which perfectly tees up the arrival of the chief clerk. This is one of the most stressful scenes in literature.
Oh, absolutely agonizing.
Gregor's a few minutes late. He misses one single train. And the firm doesn't just send a telegram, they send a senior executive directly to his bedroom door.
It's insane.
It's a terrifying look at the surveillance state of early corporate culture. The presumption of guilt is immediate.
Yeah, the arrival of the chief clerk is the system violently asserting itself. What's fascinating here is that the moment a worker stops functioning, they instantly become a threat to the established order.
Right, no grace period at all.
None. The manager stands outside the locked door and instantly escalates from a basic wellness check to outright character assassination. He accuses Gregor of slacking off, hints at embezzlement, threatens his job.
Just piling it on while Gregor is trapped inside.
Exactly. The bureaucratic system demands total submission. Illness or absence isn't seen as a human frailty, it is framed as a moral failure, a direct betrayal of the company.
And Gregor is inside, literally throwing his insect body against the door, completely ignoring the agonizing pain in his lower torso, just to placate this guy.
Desperate to appease the boss.
Yeah, he finally manages to turn the lock by biting down on the metal key with his jaws, and he's leaking this dark brown fluid everywhere. We all know the famous visual of the door swinging open and everyone just losing their mind.
Oh, total chaos.
The mother faints, spilling coffee. The clerk drops his cane and runs for his life. But here's where it gets really interesting. What's fascinating here isn't the body horror, it's the tragedy of the unreadable form.
Yes. Let's break down the phenomenology of that moment. Gregor is standing there, and in his own mind, he is delivering a perfectly rational, eloquent defense of his work ethic.
He thinks he's making a great case for himself.
Right. He is begging the manager to defend him, promising to catch the 8 o'clock train. His internal consciousness is entirely intact.
But when he opens his mouth, the social contract is completely severed.
Exactly. Because what does the outside world hear?
Just noise.
Animalistic squeaking. A horrific, overlapping series of hisses and clicks. This is the precise moment his internal alienation becomes an external, visual, and auditory reality. Society and the economic system judge value entirely by the exterior form and its ability to communicate obedience.
Right, and he can't do that anymore.
Once his voice is gone, once his recognizable, useful human form disappears, his internal humanity is instantly rendered void.
He loses the ability to speak the language of commerce, and therefore he loses his humanity entirely. He's no longer Gregor the employee or even Gregor the son. He is instantly an it.
That's brutal.
And that brings a fascinating dimension to the father's reaction. Because the father doesn't try to help him.
Not at all.
No, he grabs a rolled-up newspaper and the manager's abandoned cane and violently herds Gregor back into his room, literally shoving him through a door that's too small for his new body, causing him to bleed.
Just physically forcing him away.
The physical barrier is slammed shut, but the psychological excommunication has already happened.
And that excommunication forces Gregor into a totally new spatial and biological reality. His teenage sister, Greet, becomes his reluctant caretaker. And this is where we see the biological imperative violently clashing with human nostalgia.
Oh, the food scene.
Yes. She brings him his favorite drink from his human life, sweet milk, with pieces of white bread. It's a profound symbol of childhood comfort and maternal nurturing.
And he dives into it, expecting it to be his salvation, but it physically repulses him.
Right. His new biology forces a visceral rejection of his human past. He discovers his palate now requires rot. He craves decaying vegetables, old cheese, bones covered in congealed sauce.
Okay, wait, I want to dig into this because this biological shift leads directly to the battle over his physical space, the famous furniture debate.
Ah, yes, a crucial moment.
Great notices that Gregor enjoys crawling all over the walls and hanging upside down from the ceiling. It gives him relief. So she decides to clear out all his human furniture, the heavy wardrobe, the desk, so he has a totally empty space to crawl around in.
Right, opening up the room.
Now, traditionally, a lot of analysis frames this as a tragic stripping away of his humanity, but I have to play devil's advocate here for a second.
Go for it.
Isn't Greet just being incredibly pragmatic and kind? I mean, if my brother turns into a bug and likes hanging from the ceiling, keeping a massive oak desk in the middle of the room is just an obstacle, why is her practical accommodation viewed as such a devastating act of erasure?
It's a brilliant tension, because both perspectives are true, but they operate on entirely different philosophical planes. Greet is operating on pure utilitarian pragmatism. He is a bug, bugs need empty surfaces, therefore remove the human obstacles.
Seems logical.
It is. But by accommodating his monstrosity, she is institutionalizing it. If you take away the desk, the bed, the wardrobe, You are no longer in a human bedroom. You have built a terrarium.
Oh, wow. You're creating an enclosure for a beast.
Exactly. And the mother implicitly understands the ontological danger of this. The mother vehemently objects to removing the furniture. Her argument is that they must keep the room exactly as it was, so that when Gregor recovers, he will find his human life waiting for him.
She's holding on to hope.
Right. The mother is clinging to the environment as a tether to his identity. If the physical markers of his past remain the desk where he studied, the bed where he slept, then perhaps the human being is still in there. Removing the furniture is the physical act of admitting defeat. It is making permanent room for the insect by evicting the memory of the man.
That makes total sense, because Gregor is actually under the sofa listening to them debate this.
Yes, taking it all in.
At first, he's on Greet's side. He wants the space to crawl. But hearing his mother's voice wakes him out of this animalistic stupor. He realizes that the isolation and the silence were eroding his mind. He needs those physical reminders, so he breaks cover, he scrambles up the wall, and he desperately throws his hot, sticky belly over the glass frame of the picture of the lady in the fur muff.
Which is such a deeply loaded image. It's not just a random magazine clipping he framed.
Right. Why that specific picture? Why not a family photo or something?
Because the picture represents aesthetics.
Yeah.
It represents human desire, artifice, fashion, sexuality concepts that are utterly alien to a biological insect. By protecting it with his body, he's making a fierce, desperate assertion of his aesthetic appreciation.
Like a rebellion.
Exactly. It is his way of mutely screaming against his own erasure, basically saying, I am still here. I still value beauty. I am not just a digestive tract and crawling legs.
But of course, the optics of this are a total disaster. He's using his grotesque monster body to shield a human image. The mother walks in, sees this giant brown mass plastered against the floral wallpaper, and faints dead away.
Complete panic.
And this chaos sets the stage for one of the most brilliant mechanistic shifts in the whole narrative, the resurgence of the father.
The transfer of patriarchal power.
Yes. I love the analogy of a gruesome zero-sum battery here. For the father to power up, Gregor literally has to be drained and pushed into the dirt. Let's look at the father before the transformation. He was bankrupt, sluggish, exhausted. He sat in a dressing gown all day and literally had to be lifted out of his chair by the women of the house.
He was completely dependent.
He was essentially a dependent child while Gregor was the provider.
But when Gregor's economic utility collapses, the vacuum of power demands to be filled. We connect this to the bigger picture. When the father returns home during this chaos, he is completely transformed.
It's like night and day.
He isn't wearing a dressing gown. He is standing erect in a tight blue bank messenger's uniform with gleaming gold buttons. His double chin is thrust out, his eyes are sharp and alert.
It's a second metamorphosis. But why the uniform? Why is that detail so focused upon in the text?
Because the uniform represents state, corporate, and militaristic authority. The father hasn't just regained his health, he has wrapped himself in the armor of the institutional power that oppresses the worker.
Oh, that's incredibly dark.
Right. Gregor is trapped in the biological armor of his alienation, while the father dons the sartorial armor of the capitalist machine. The hierarchy is brutally restored. The father assumes Gregor has attacked the mother, and without asking a single question, because authoritarian power doesn't ask questions, he attacks.
Which brings us to the apples. The father starts literally bombing Gregor with apples from a fruit bowl. It sounds almost farcical, like a cartoon, but it's utterly lethal. One of these apples hits Gregor and sinks deeply into his soft back. It lodges there, and the pain is blinding.
And we cannot ignore the heavy mythological symbolism of the apple here.
Right, it's never just an apple.
No, it is the fruit of the tree of knowledge, the catalyst for original sin, and the expulsion from Eden. By lodging the apple into Gregor's flesh, the father is physically branding him with the sin of his uselessness. It is the physical manifestation of guilt.
And no one takes it out. That's the most horrifying detail to me. He survives the attack, but the apple stays lodged in his back for over a month. It rots. It gets infected. It gets covered in dust and lint.
It's just left to decay.
It literally cripples him so he can't crawl on the ceilings anymore. He is reduced to dragging himself across the floor like a dying invalid. It's the literal embodiment of becoming a burden.
It forces a highly uncomfortable confrontation with the limits of compassion. Think about it. How quickly does familial love curdle into resentment when the economic foundation of the relationship shifts?
It's a terrifying question.
The father's attack wasn't just a moment of panic. It was the violent rejection of a dependent. Kafka is holding up a mirror to the transactional nature of the nuclear family. When Gregor was the provider, he was tolerated, even if they took him for granted. The moment he requires difficult, non-reciprocal care, he becomes a target for destruction.
And that transactional nature infects the very architecture of the house. Because the breadwinner is out of commission, the family is drowning financially, the mother is destroying her eyesight, sewing delicate lingerie late into the night. Greet is exhausting herself as a salesgirl.
They're all forced back into the machine.
Exactly. They even have to fire their regular servant and hire this rough, unsentimental charwoman. But the most devastating structural change is that they're forced to monetize their living space. They rent out the main rooms to 3 strict, bearded boarders.
The boarders are the ultimate intrusion of commerce into the domestic sanctuary. They are described almost as a single, monolithic entity. They all have beards. They act in unison. They represent the exacting, unyielding demands of the consumer market. They demand absolute cleanliness, order, and silence.
And because they demand perfection in the main house, where does all the imperfection go? Where does the family put the ash cans, the broken furniture, the garbage? They throw it into Gregor's room.
It is the spatial commodification of his erasure. The biological son, the one who literally paid the lease on the apartment through his agonizing labor, is shoved into the trash heap to make room for paying customers.
It's just so bleak.
He is crawling over piles of junk covered in dust and the remnants of rotting food. He's being starved physically, but more importantly, he's being starved of his dignity. He is the repressed filth of the capitalist system, hidden away behind a locked door so the gears of commerce can keep turning in the living room.
But the soul doesn't die just because the body is in the trash, which leads us to the violin scene. This is arguably the climax of his internal humanity. The door is left slightly ajar. The boarders have finished their dinner, and Greet is asked to play the violin in the living room.
The dynamic here is crucial. The parents are hovering anxiously, treating the boarders like royalty, terrified of offending them. Greet begins to play, and the boarders are entirely unappreciative.
They couldn't care less.
They stand around blowing cigar smoke, looking at the ceiling, clearly annoyed that this isn't the professional entertainment they feel entitled to. They are pure transactional beings, completely devoid of aesthetic appreciation.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because Gregor, who is covered in filth, crippled by a rotting apple in his back, is drawn out of the darkness. He inches out into the light of the living room, completely ignoring the massive physical danger of being seen. He is entranced by the music. He asks himself, was he an animal that music had such an effect upon him?
It is a stunning philosophical inversion. The wealthy, socially acceptable human men have the souls of unfeeling beasts. The grotesque, terrifying monster has the soul of a deeply sensitive human. It is his ultimate triumph of consciousness.
It really is his most human moment.
He fantasizes about pulling Greet into his room, protecting her from these Philistines, and telling her about his secret plan to send her to the music conservatory.
He still wants to provide. Even now, his deepest desire is to facilitate her art. But reality crashes down. The middle boarder spots him. And notice, the boarders aren't even scared. They don't run away screaming like the chief clerk did. They just point.
Right, it's not fear, it's indignation.
They are amused, and then they are deeply offended by the unsanitary conditions. They immediately cancel their lease, refuse to pay rent, and threaten lawsuits.
Because for them, Gregor isn't a supernatural terror. He is a breach of contract. He is a sanitation issue. And this economic catastrophe triggers the final, unforgivable betrayal from the family. Once the boarders retreat to their room, Greet, the sister who brought him food, the one he just risked his life to listen to, turns to the parents and delivers the verdict.
She slams her hand on the table. She says, "Things can't go on like this. I won't pronounce the name of my brother in front of this monster, and so all I say is, we must get rid of it."
We must pause on the linguistic mechanics of what Greet is doing here.
It.
The shift in pronouns is the death knell of his existence. By refusing to say his name, she systematically revokes his identity. Language precedes action. You cannot easily murder your brother, Gregor, but you can sweep an it out with the trash.
Her logic is so cold, it's terrifying. She argues that if this creature were truly Gregor, he would have realized long ago that human beings cannot live with such an animal, and he would have voluntarily left. Because the creature is staying and tormenting them, she concludes it cannot possibly be him.
It is a profound psychological defense mechanism. The family is exhausted. They have reached the absolute limit of their utilitarian endurance. To alleviate the crushing moral guilt of wanting their own son dead, they must convince themselves that the son is already gone.
They have to unname him to survive it.
Exactly. They retroactively strip him of his humanity to absolve themselves of the crime of abandoning him. The logic is brutal. Because he is a burden to us, he is not Gregor.
I have to ask, though, is Greet evil here? Or is she just a victim of a system that forces impossible choices for survival?
She is pragmatic, which in Kafka's world is often indistinguishable from cruel. She is choosing the survival of the unit over the life of the non-producing anomaly. It is the ultimate victory of the capitalist ethos over familial loyalty.
And the most devastating part is that Gregor is listening to this entire speech. And his reaction, he doesn't get angry, he doesn't hiss or charge at them, he agrees with them.
Total acceptance.
He feels a profound sense of duty to disappear. With the rotting apple grinding in his back, he slowly, agonizingly turns around and crawls back into his dark room.
And as soon as he crosses the threshold, Grease slams the door and throws the deadbolt. The click of that lock is the final sound of his excommunication from the world.
He is alone. He can't move anymore. The pain fades. And as the dawn breaks outside his window, he doesn't think of their betrayal. He thinks of his family with deep emotion and love. His conviction that he must die to save them is even stronger than his sister's desire to be rid of him. His head drops to the floor, and he breathes his last breath.
Which forces the central philosophical question of the text. Who is the real monster? Is it the creature trapped in a repulsive shell who dies entirely out of selfless love and duty? Or is it the family who wore the external masks of humanity, but whose love was entirely conditional, transactional, and quickly discarded when the economic utility expired?
His humanity remained totally pure until the very last second. Theirs eroded the moment the paycheck stopped. Which leads us to the morning after. The charwoman comes in, pokes his stiff body with a broom and yells, "It's dead!" And what does the family do? They don't weep. There's no funeral. The father literally crosses himself and says, "Thank God."
Their immediate reaction is to flex their newfound power. The father goes out, confronts the three arrogant boarders, and kicks them out of the house. The family reclaims their domestic space.
And then the ending.
Yeah.
Which is arguably more disturbing than the beginning. They write excuse letters to their bosses, finally taking a day off, and they leave the apartment. They take a sunlit tram ride out to the countryside. The tone shifts completely. It's grotesque how happy it is. It reads like a bright, blooming spring story.
The tonal whiplash is highly intentional.
Yeah.
The dark, oppressive, gothic horror of Gregor's room is instantly replaced by sunshine and fresh air. They sit on the tram, they discuss their finances, and they realize they're actually in great shape.
They're free.
They all have good jobs. They can downsize to a better apartment now that they don't have to hide a giant bug in the back room.
And the final image. The parents look over at Greet. She has survived the ordeal. She stands up and stretches her young, vibrant body in the sunlight. The parents exchange a glance, realizing she has blossomed into a beautiful woman, and it's time to find her a wealthy husband.
It is the ultimate, horrifying punchline. The title of this story is The Metamorphosis. For a century, people have assumed that refers to Gregor turning into an insect. But the critical consensus and the profound tragedy of the text is that the true metamorphosis happened to the family.
They are the ones who transformed.
Yes. They started as helpless, dependent parasites feeding off Gregor's labor. But through his suffering, they hardened. They adapted. They became pragmatic, self-sufficient, ruthless survivors. They literally consumed his life, his space, and his energy, and they moved on without a single backward glance.
They just left him in the dust.
They adapted to survive the economic machine, and the cost of that survival was the complete loss of the compassion that makes us human.
It's a chilling realization. We started this deep dive talking about a guy waking up as a bug, and we've ended up looking at a terrifying mirror of our own social architecture.
It really forces us to confront how fragile our identities are. We are accepted, we are loved, we are deemed human only so long as we conform to the shape and the function that society expects of us.
And that is exactly where we want to leave you today. Think about the structures of your own life right now. Your workplace, your social circles, maybe even your own household. You go to sleep human, you wake up human, and everything feels stable and binary. But if your specific utility vanished tomorrow, if you could no longer produce, provide, or perform your designated role, how long would you get to keep your name before the system turned you into an it? Look closely at your life and ask yourself the hardest question Kafka leaves us with. Are we truly loving the people in our lives, or are we just loving what they do for us?